Hi, Alexander. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let's begin with your background. How did you get into crypto and how did you get started with Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance?
Yeah, sure. So I'm happy to say a couple of words on that. There's a lot of to unfold, but basically, to a long story short, I was interested in kind of Bitcoin a long time ago, mostly because of the idea, a bit of philosophically, specifically when it comes to kind of the digital scarcity part, but mostly because disintermediation, self-custody, that kind of what brought me into Bitcoin. What got me more involved, I was basically observing the entire ecosystem, but I got more involved in about 2018 when I started mining myself, Bitcoin mining. And really when I got personally also more exposed to it. My background is more traditional finance. So I worked in a couple of roles from like corporate banking, asset management, trading. So that's kind of more my previous work background, but I got more and more kind of soaked into this digital asset ecosystem, mostly related to Bitcoin. And I did a lot of studies as well over the last years, ended up in Cambridge at some point. And I think there was a big debate about specific the environmental impact, energy. It was a huge topic in 2021. This kind of coincided with my finishing of my studies in Cambridge, and the center was really, I think, same as Center for Alternative Finance, was in many kind of cases at the heart of this debate because they already started to look into this more closely. And yeah, I had a lot of practical experience since I, was at that point mining myself, and so that I can contribute there, specifically when it comes to model building. This kind of qualitative side, which is also one of the things that I think I knew from my past in finance, but also naturally having this idea which hardware is being used and those sort of practical insights. And yeah, that was kind of what brought me into the center. And since 2021, I'm there, and now really trying to push forward like new research initiatives, specifically to understand better the entire kind of specifically mining environment, given that there is still a lack of data, and that is where we see ourselves coming in, working directly with industry folks to just provide very unique insights.
And what are your latest and most interesting discoveries?
So very recently, it was in end of April this year, we published a report that has been in the works for a very long time. So where we really try to get a lot together the industry stakeholders, specifically mining firms, and really get, instead of relying on the theoretical estimations, really trying to understand the environment by directly speaking and directly talking to and surveying essentially the key industry players. And I think we got a lot of interesting insights from, for instance, kind of energy mix to even some calculations on e-waste. We got insights onto, for instance, the extent of off-grid energy use, of off-grid setups. We got insights into like to what extent are currently, for instance, otherwise routinely flared gas is being used. A lot of very interesting insights, and specifically also when it comes to sentiment of miners, what keeps them awake at night, what are your growth constraints, how do you manage risks. So we got a lot of insights. So everyone who's interested in mining, I would encourage you to read the report. But yeah, so that's kind of the I think there's a lot of to unpack, and for everyone who is interested in the space in some specific aspect, I'm sure you're gonna find something that is of interest.
Maybe you could give us a couple of points, something maybe counterintuitive that you have.
Counterintuitive. I think one of the key findings were a more recent update of the energy mix. We in the past relied, for instance, on pool data. And our latest estimate in that regard was from early 2022. Naturally, at that point, the global distribution of mining activity was very different than it is today. And I think one of the key insights was that we have a more contemporary estimate, for instance, of the energy mix. We see what we, based on our survey, we found that essentially about more than 50% is now sustainable, which is renewable plus nuclear. So those are, I think, one of the key insights that was quite important to have a bit of an update. And otherwise, for instance, what was also interesting to have some idea about to what extent otherwise flared gas is being used. So we have actually a bit of a face to the name, essentially, because before it was a story more. We have all these kind of stories from like, utilizing waste heat, the flare gas, all this kind of like more qualitative descriptions, but we kind of missed actually, what is the magnitude, right? And I think this is what we discovered to some extent in the current report, And we will go, I think, a lot deeper if we publish the next report where we add some I think, interesting insights that are specifically concerning those sort of topics.
Mm-hmm. And what are other projects that you are engaging with at the moment?
So we do a lot of, obviously with Bitcoin, but it's not just solely Bitcoin. So the next project will very likely be a new estimate of Ethereum's electricity consumption, where we have a lot more data available. And that will be kind of, I think, my next immediate project. But then again, I think our USP is really where we can drive value working directly with industry stakeholders. I think we have built a lot of trust over time. So we have those who have the data, who run the operations, actually want to work with us. We get a lot of positive feedback for the first iteration of the report. I expect that we already had a very large sample, so we captured nearly 50% of the entire global network hash rate, and about 50 companies, 49 to be specific. But I think if we do the next iteration of the report, we will see more participation in terms of the number of firms participating, but also I would expect then a notable increase in the kind of hash rate share we capture. So I think, yeah, as we go along, hopefully report by report, we will go closer and closer to the ground truth. I mean, you always rely on a sample, but I think we really can fulfill a very valuable function there, specifically collecting data that you otherwise just won't get.
Let's speak about the future. What is the future of Bitcoin mining, and how will it look like in your opinion?
It's a tricky question. I think what we currently, and I briefly, I think, touched upon this in the panel we had just, as we move along, halving by halving, right, I think the environment is getting more competitive. We see it already being very, very competitive. And I don't think it's necessarily getting it better. So miners need to become more creative. I mean, and they do this already in, for instance, diversifying into other business streams, like many have publicly announced to look into AI, but also kind of finding ways to harness energy more effectively. That can be, for instance, reutilizing the waste heat, whether it's for district heating greenhouses, or whatever is kind of a local application. So you just don't just blow the heat out. Essentially with fans, you really try to capture this heat and utilize it as the byproduct of the mining process. So I think we will see a lot more kind of creativity in really harnessing energy more effectively, or finding stranded opportunities, whether it's stranded renewables, for instance, where you have some sort of excess supply, whether it's in Africa, for instance. I mean, Ethiopia is, I think, the most prominent example, but there might be other regions as well that have some available supply, where you can, given the location agnostic nature, flexibility that you have with mining, right? You have a container, you're generally very flexible compared to building actually a more sophisticated infrastructure for some other operation, like electrolyzers or something. I mean, that's a lot more capex heavy. I think mining, it's about creativity and just trying to find ways to, getting a bit of a competitive edge. I guess that's how mining will look going forward as we gradually move away from a kind of block subsidy financed model.
Would it be possible to draw a parallel with Ethereum?
I mean, in a sense that if the community wants to shift to proof of stake, or
No. In a sense that what's the future for Ethereum based on what you have already discovered for yourself?
I think I think there's a very, very wide range of opinions in that regard. I think that I'm not a Bitcoin only person, right? So I think Ethereum has a very, very valuable and useful function. I don't think they're necessarily competing. I think the narrative of Bitcoin is very different than the narrative for Ethereum. Ethereum is really this kind of entire ecosystem of applications, from decentralized lending to God knows what, right? So you can build pretty much anything you can imagine on Ethereum, whereas Bitcoin, I think, has now established itself as this kind of digital gold safe haven. That's kind of, I think, more the narrative currently for Bitcoin, where basically hodl Bitcoin, right? Buy and hold Bitcoin. You see that the entire discussion about kind of strategic reserves, strategic Bitcoin reserves, whether at the corporate level, but on a national level, for instance. So I think both, they are not really competing in my view. I mean, you have kind of entire second layer on Bitcoin as well, but I think really that those are not necessarily competing, right? Where Bitcoin will be this, let's say, digital gold kind of narrative, whereas Ethereum is really building, whatever you can imagine on it, essentially.
It was a pleasure to learn more about your perspectives on those dimensions, right, of cryptocurrency space and the cryptocurrency industry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.